Now, moving on to Hungary, thousands of protesters rallied in the Hungarian capital Budapest against corruption in the country's tax authorities. Demonstrators are demanding the resignation of tax chief Ildiko Vida, who was recently accused by US officials of corruption and denied entry into the country. More details in the following report.
Hungarians are raising their voices against corruption in the country. Thousands took to the streets of the capital Budapest last night to demand a zero-tolerance policy against corruption. As they marched from the parliament to the presidential palace, they held placards with names and pictures of senior officials, condemning them for their roles in recent graft allegations.
This power elite has occupied the country. Not only do they include their theft into law, not only do they snatch private property, not only do they steal state property, but they also strongly interfere in the market in order to put their own friends, the CBA, and luring Mizaros in a position of monopolists.
We're very big taxpayers actually. We have a medium-sized company, yet we didn't get anything from this government and we have been struggling. Today we just sent off 8 million foreign tax into the tax office, but with a very heavy heart because we don't know in which pocket it will land.
As they did in previous protests last month, they want the resignation of the country's tax chief, Ildiko Vida. She was recently denied entry to the United States along with several other Hungarian officials on corruption charges, which she denies. Protesters outraged by these allegations feel the government and Prime Minister Viktor Orbán are failing to deal with the actions of such politicians.
It's outrageous, simply outrageous. We never used to go to protest before because one could imagine better things to do. But now I cannot imagine not coming here because what's going on is terrible. How these politicians behave, how they completely disregard the people.
But the protesters' demands seem to have fallen on deaf ears. In an interview this morning, Orbán said he will continue to defend Vida and take legal actions against those allegations. It was also reported that Orbán said the US must provide evidence before any probe into the tax authority starts. He recently faced much criticism from his Western partners over strict regulatory policies for big business, a proposed ban on internet usage, as well as his opposition to sanctions against Russia. But it's now passed on these protesters who pledge to continue demonstrating until they see a change.
Well, journalist Lovas Istvan is joining us over the phone from Hungary. Traditionally, Hungary hasn't really seen much protest. We have been seeing these protests gain momentum, especially since they decided to try and impose this tax on the internet. Do you think Orbán now is losing his popularity because we are seeing more of these protests on the streets of Hungary?
Yes, he is losing popularity after the third elections in this year, when he got a sweeping electoral victory. And after the third one, they made quite a number of mistaken steps. But the opposition are not really after the issues that in themselves are worthy of protesting, but they have a history of hating the government because it's not a liberal, left liberal, neoliberal government, but a right of center government. But still, today, according to the newest released opinion poll, the government is leading by a huge, huge percentage.
So that means, are you trying to say that these protesters are not a representation of the vast majority of the population in Hungary then?
Oh, no, just a tiny minority, and organized by so-called civil NGOs, non-governmental organizations, financed by Norway, etc., and Americans like Mr. George Soros. No, not at all. the government has nothing to fear.
Yeah, and we have heard quite a bit of vocal support to these protesters from the US. We heard recently a comment by the US Senator John McCain branding the Prime Minister Viktor Orban as a neo-fascist dictator. How much of an influence do you think the US have had on these protests and their growing influence? Their growing, increasing, sorry.
I think statements like this, defamation, like the Prime Minister as a neo-fascist, is a godsend for the government, because automatically people rally by and for the government that they have chosen. And if an American senator, Republican John McCain, dares telling things about a democratically elected prime minister like Mr. Orban, then it reflects very badly on the United States, which is being hated in Hungary by the majority. And I am talking about the United States that was universally loved prior to the change of the communist system in 1990.
Mr. Lovas Istvan, I'm going to have to stop you there, but thank you very much for joining us. The journalist joining us over the phone from Hungary.